I'm Shannon the Grow, and for my weekly podcast, Into the Fray, I collect first-hand encounters with the strange, like these.
And it's standing there looking at me, and it is huge and dark and hairy. I thought my dad was the biggest, toughest guy in the world. This thing would tower over my father.
He looks at me, and his face changed. His bone structure shifted. His hairline receded. His hair color changed. The guy's face changed right in front of me.
It stepped out of the dark and into the light of the fire. My mom saw a dog walking through the house with an upside-down head, and at that point, when she told me, I was like, you need to get a priest over to that house quick.
Wendy's home-style French toast sticks are so delicious, some are saying that they're better than their mom's breakfast.
Excuse me, did you just say Wendy's French toast sticks are better than my breakfast?
Mom, is that you?
Answer the question.
I said some people are saying that because they're so crispy on the outside and fluffy on the inside and perfect in every way.
Uh-huh. And what do you think?
I think it's time to tell people to choose wisely. Choose Wendy's sweet and crispy home-style French toast sticks.
That's still not an answer.
At participating U.S. Wendy's during breakfast hours.
It didn't listen to me. It walked out of the thicket. It turned around and looked at me.
They looked up, and in this tree, there was a monkey man. And the monkey man jumped down out of the tree and started running away.
And suddenly, they're right in front of the car. He slams on the brakes and manages to stop. And he's skidding because it's like quite, gravelly. And literally for about a second and a half, they just stood there because they don't know where to go. And you tell them panicking. They're like roof flapping, and their face is like twitching.
Welcome back to Bigfoot Society, a podcast where we focus on cryptids, the strange, and the unexplained of this world. If you've got a story or something weird to share, send an email over to me at bigfootsociety@gmail.com. And if you'd like to support this show, head on over to patreon.com/the Bigfoot Society. And now, on with the show. All right, Bigfoot Society, we've got the privilege of talking to Mr. David Bakara tonight. How's it going, David?
Very good.
Awesome. I've been wanting to talk with you for a while because you're one of those guys where your name comes up every once in a while, and just for different reasons. The first, before I get into that, I will mention, okay, so you are the owner, correct, of the Expedition Bigfoot Museum. Not to be... Yeah. It's not associated with the TV show. We're just going to put that right out in the open.
That's correct.
You are not associated. So a lot of people I've seen are like, oh, like the TV show? No, not at all. Right. It's a totally different animal. So just want to put that out there. But, David, you've got quite the history with looking into Bigfoot. Let's start at the beginning where... how did you get into this creature and get so enthralled with it to want to make your own museum? How did that happen?
I grew up in Miami, Florida, back in the late 60s and early 70s. And probably around when I was about 9, 10 years old, I guess that put me around 5th grade, or I guess 6th grade, somewhere around there. And I would be taking history and biology, and they were talking about the evolutionary timeline and cavemen and Neanderthals and dinosaurs, and learning all that stuff in school. And then I started seeing all these. My dad was always watch the news, so I would sit down with my dad and I'd watch the news. And God, it was all the time we were getting stories about the Florida skunk ape, Bigfoot. It was like a lot of them. They were bringing in trappers. They were interviewing police officers, park rangers, just regular people. And even in my young mind, going to school and seeing this stuff on TV, there was like a major conflict right there with my young brain. I was going, wait a minute, they're telling me this thing in school, And then people are telling me they're seeing these huge caveman-like creatures in Florida, not that far from Miami. And something clicked in my brain. And I was like, well, somebody's not telling the truth, because they both can't live in the same space.
Right.
And I think, even though I hadn't thought it out, something clicked in my brain at that young age going, there's something wrong here. And I think that's what really got me interested. And of course, that I started consuming what few books there was around the 60s and 70s. And that's really what kicked it off.
After that, your bio says that you actually became associated. You became an investigator with the Florida chapter of the BFRO. What was that like going on? You know, I'm assuming there was like a first expedition that you went on in order to become, you know, part of the BFRO. Do you remember how that first expedition was?
Yeah, and I think I was very fortunate, because even though at my young age I was reading, consuming as much things I could about Bigfoot, and there really wasn't that much in the 60s and early 70s, but there was a lot of things about UFOs and aliens. So to bide my time waiting for Bigfoot stuff, I would consume a lot of not fantasy, but, you know, books about the hills, abduction. And I started consuming those things as well. And I didn't really get into like space operas or space science fiction as much as I got into like reading factual stories of people's run-ins. So as I started hearing more and more, then the Bigfoot stuff started coming back in. And I raised a family. I worked, got a job. My kids got to be fairly grown up. And on my 50th birthday, I treated myself, me and my brother, to a Bigfoot expedition put on by the Florida chapter of the BFRO up in North Florida. And we had a great time. We showed up, lots of nice people on the expedition. And at the end of the expedition, actually 2 people had sightings, you know, during the expedition. I didn't. But at the end of the expedition, they asked me and my brother if we wanted to become investigators, because there were so many reports coming on. They just didn't have enough people to answer them. And that's another side of this story. And I said, sure. And, you know, when you consume Bigfoot books and you see documentaries on TV, you're getting like a 2-dimensional picture of what's happening. But boy, when you start to interview witnesses firsthand, you go to their house, you go to the place where it happened, you go to the campsite and meet the witnesses. And that's what I did. I didn't like to, I would talk to them on the phone, and I actually had the time where I could jump my car, and sometimes my wife, we go make a weekend out of it. I go to the witness's house and they sit down and tell me the story. And I started getting, I mean, right off the bat, I started getting complicated stories and observations that witnesses were telling me. And I was like, wow, this is, you know, I don't remember hearing too much about this. So I would, on the side, I would text or message other investigators. Hey, you getting this kind of stuff? You know, do you ever get this weird stuff? Orbs, flashing lights, appearing, disappearing. Oh yeah, but we don't talk about that. I was like, what? Yeah, we don't like to talk about that. I was like, why don't you talk about it? Well, they kind of flush that stuff out of the system. I go, well, that's like being an investigator and a murderer, and you get something that you don't like, so you just leave it out. That's not how investigations work. And it soured me pretty quickly, even though I hung with it. I had other investigators. We were like, they waited. Hey, did you get this? Yeah. Did you hear that too? Yeah. And so there's actually, unfortunately, there's a front of the Bigfoot world that you get, the acceptable, easy to digest fluff. The real stuff is the untold stuff, the stuff investigators get that never gets to the TV crew or the documentary people, the stuff that Bigfoot authors, they see it, but they omit it from the stories because it's too weird. They want to sell books. So I can assure you there's an underworld to this that doesn't make it to the general public. And I've made that my mission, that I'm going to expose that stuff.
Wow.
That's why I really love what I do. The museum is located right on the highway, right on a main drag, and we get so many people that drive by and have this kind of this interest, but I never had time to go to Bigfoot conference or had time to go get a hotel room and go to this big Bigfoot festival or something. But by God, they got time to whip around and come into this museum, and I get the chance to introduce Bigfoot factual evidence to them. Just happened to be driving down the road. And I'm very fortunate to be in that position where I'm not trying to relearn investigators that are kind of stuck on one scenario. I get to introduce it to kids and young adults, and I get a chance to reach out to them before they get this really hardcore narrative, this ape narrative in their mind. So, and that is what made me cue into Clifford LaBrecque. And the conversations I had with him on the phone were just so.
Oh my God! Okay, well, we're not getting there yet. Yeah. You're like, I know this guy wants the Clifford LaBrecque stuff. Like, listeners have heard episode 150 where I just go super deep into Iowa Bigfoot Information Center. We're gonna hold off for a little bit. Mm-hmm. God, that's fascinating. So tell me, like, what is? I'm sure people are curious. What's a good example of the stuff that is being, like, censored out?
Yeah. So one of the first, oh my goodness, probably, I bet it was only like my 5th investigation. Went to a young man's, it happened to a young man when he was 12 years old near Ocala, Florida. And it was early in the morning, it was a school morning, and he said I had walked around the back of the house. My mother said, take the garbage out. So I had this bag of garbage, and I said I walked out the back, and the sun had just come up, but it was light outside. Walk around the corner of my house, and there's this bear bent over, digging in the garbage can with his back to me. And he said, and I just froze. Like, I got this bag of garbage, I'm just froze. I can't move. He said I didn't make a noise, but all of a sudden this bear knew I was there and stopped, and then stood up, and then turned around and looked at me, and I realized, oh my God, this thing, it wasn't a bear. And he said, and then we locked eyes with one another. Of course, he's down here and he's way up here. Right. We locked eyes with one another. And then he said, and I went in the house and told my parents. I was like, wait a minute. I said, we're missing a little something there, because I know that when the eyes are the window to the soul, something normally happens if you lock eyes with something. You get some kind of a feeling. I said, what happened when you locked eyes with him? I mean, that must have been quite something. He said, yeah, I don't like to talk about that. Oh. And I said, I'll tell you what, man to man, sometimes it's just easier to type it out in an email, when something emotional, instead of having to talk about it. I said, why don't you just send me an email, let me know what happened. He said, okay, I can do that. I said, okay. So I cut it short, got up in the morning, came back, ding, there was an email. And I'll never forget this email because it changed. It was the tack that started me going like this. With other Bigfooters were going like this. It was this tack that kind of got me off the well-trodden path, I guess. And he says, I opened up the email, and it was just like one paragraph. He said, I looked at these things in the eyes, and this thought jammed in my head. I was frozen, and this thought just jammed in my 12-year-old brain. He says, there's no way I thought this. I wasn't into science fiction movies. I didn't know anything about Bigfoot. I'd heard about him on the news, but I never gave it a thought. I was just taking the garbage out, man. I was still not even fully awake from sleep the next morning, for the next night. I was just trying to get to the garbage can. He said, this thought jammed in my head, and it was just one sentence. It said, you, parentheses, man, are not from this world, parentheses, planet. And then it turned away and walked off. And he said, once it turned away, I was like unfrozen. I could move. Because once I saw it, I was frozen. I couldn't move. And he said, I went back in and I told my parents what happened. And I think he said they believed him. But here's the funny part, too. He says, I didn't come from a particularly well-read family. And he said, I'm not even sure if his father he finished high school or not. They were just just getting by a working class family. And he said, after that happened to me, my whole life took a turn. He said, I started reading books on theology. And now this guy, he just, from 12 years old, I just started consuming all these books. And he sent me all kinds of books. I've got back in my office amongst all the other books. But so when you talk to this guy, of course I talked to him, probably 25, 30 years after it happened. And he could really put it in just beautiful, precise words. But being a UFO guy, I don't want to say I was a UFO guy, but I'd studied UFOs and abduction. That kind of, when he introduced that to me, it wasn't like an alien. It wasn't like a weird thought. I'd already learned about aliens and that kind of, and as a matter of fact, and then I typed up the report and sent it in, and they go, yeah, we can't publish that. You have to take that out of there. I go, wow. Well, why would I take it out of there? He was adamant, and his name's not in there. We keep it all confidential. Yeah, we can't put that in there. And I started to think, I started getting soured on it after that. And then I had another report from a guy in Georgia, Cochran, Georgia. Talked to him on the phone. His daughter reached out to me. He didn't like talking about it, but it was really important. She wanted him to tell somebody. So I got on the phone with this guy, and he was driving his car in Cochran, Georgia. It was like 11 o'clock in the morning, sunny day. And this thing, he's going over this bridge. Tell me the name of the bridge. It's in the report. And he says, this thing comes from the other side of the bridge, and there's nowhere for me to go. I have two little shoulders on this. It's a 2-lane bridge. I got nowhere to go. And I hit the brakes, and this thing's standing upright, and I hit this car, scored the front of my El Camino. I think he said he was driving.
Stay tuned for more Bigfoot Society. We'll be right back after these messages.
Office Depot Office Max has great deals on everything you need to succeed, like stylish furniture and chairs to keep you working comfortably, the latest tech to keep you organized and productive, calendars and planners to keep you on schedule, and cleaning supplies to keep your space spotless. It's the perfect time to stock up on the supplies you need to succeed, from the office to your home and everywhere in between. Need it fast? No problem. Place your order at OfficeDepot.com and pick it up in just 20 minutes at your nearest Office Depot or Office Max store.
If you're looking to move out of your parents' place, you could really cut expenses by bundling your car and renter's insurance with Progressive, which is good because your little brother has gotten really territorial. You're blood related. You'd think it would be fine to share food in the fridge. I mean, who writes their name on every individually wrapped slice of cheese, Tyler? Still, you've got to admire the commitment. So bundle your renter's and car insurance with Progressive and use the savings to help you move out and have all the cheese you want. Progressive Casualty Insurance Company. Coverage provided and serviced by affiliates and third-party insurers.
The Venture X card from Capital One gives you premium travel benefits, perfect for seeing Taylor Swift The Eras Tour. Presented by Capital One. Ooh, I do love her. Earn 5 times miles on flights and 10 times miles on hotels through Capital One Travel.
Enjoy your stay in Suite 13.
Whoa, 13? That's Taylor's lucky number. The Venture X card from Capital One. What's in your wallet?
Terms apply. See CapitalOne.com for details.
I hit it, and it flew off the bridge into the dirt or whatever on the other side, off the bridge. He said it was about 5 feet tall. And he said it had a snout on it like a wolf or like a bear snout. Stand on 2 legs, had 2 long back legs, and it had 2 shorter legs. And he said it looked like a dog walking on 2 feet. He said it's only about 5.5 feet tall. It wasn't real big. He said, I wouldn't want to hit this thing. And it flew off. And he said, I pull my car over. I get out. My car is dented, but it's not smashed. I can still drive it. He says, I get off and I run down and look at this thing. And people heard, the neighbors or whatnot, heard the brake squeal. They come out of their houses, the neighbors, farmers. And they're looking at this. They're all looking at it. There's like 6 people standing around. But it was in the early 80s. Nobody had phones. No cameras on their phones.
Right.
And he can hear one of the neighbors going, so that's what's been killing my livestock.
Oh, man.
And another goes, yeah, I lost 2 goats. And one guy, yeah, I lost a sheep. I lost a calf. And he can hear him talking behind him. So that's what's been killing our livestock. So I don't think he even had a cell phone. He had to go. Oh, somebody went into the house and called the game warden.
Okay.
And I don't think he waited. He went home. Can't remember. Anyways, the game warden, he even gave me the game warden's name. And he said, I got a call the next day. He called the game warden or the game warden called him. And Yeah, because I think he left before the game warden came, because he had asked the game warden, so what was that thing? What was that? And game warden said, I've never seen anything like it in my life. I don't know what it was.
Wow.
So he gave me his name and everything, and I think I sent him some sketches, some of those Linda Godfrey sketches of Dogman. He said, "That's it. What was that thing?" But it didn't have like real long arms; it just had little arms that were carried in front of it. And so I typed out the report, sent it in. Yeah, we can't publish that. I was like, what? It's not like I cherry picked it. It's just another investigation. That's when I was like, I think it might have been my 9th or 10th one. I think I did a couple more reports after that, but I kind of lost my love of it, because now I'm really I'm a cog in a fake machine pumping out fake information, and I didn't feel good about that. Yeah. If I'm going to do it, I'm going to do it right, and I'm going to be honest about it, and you're not going to tell me, because if I cut this out and then you release it, then it's turned into something that it's not. So I'd rather tell the truth. So, yeah, I'm not part of that organization. I'm friends with a lot of people, because a lot of people in organizations, they get reports like that, and when they try to release them, they get the same attitude that I got. So, yeah, that's why I'm doing what I'm doing.
Oh, that's a rabbit hole you could go down. It's like, what happens to the paranormal woo reports that the BFRO gets? They just get...
They flush them. There's a little box. You can hit hallucination, insane. Yeah, and so you can opt out from, I read the report. Oh, it disappeared. Well, he's obviously hallucinating. Click, goes away.
Wow.
You won't, a lot of you won't even hear about him. Yeah.
Oh, this is funny. This is so funny. So you're not with them anymore, for sure.
Mm-hmm.
How does one go about starting a Bigfoot museum? What's that process like?
I was so fortunate that I grew up where I grew up, and my dad and my mom loved taking their kids to do fun things. I was really fortunate. So my dad took us to all kinds of Florida roadside attractions, and monkey jungle and parrot jungle and the seaquarium. I think they took us to Disney World one time, because even back then it was pretty expensive. And museums. My dad took me to a lot of museums. So I remember even when I was a kid, I'd go to museums. To see something, how they had it mounted. And even before I opened this museum, I would go, oh, wow, how did they mount that to the wall? Oh, look. Well, I got one of those, like a little thing that you can move it around. And I remember looking at exhibits and how they made them work, never thinking, just being interested in it, never thinking in a million years I was going to open a museum. So when it came time to open the museum, I already had this little library of how to do things and make it look professional, not just staple posters to the wall, because that ain't going to work. If anything, if you try to open a Bigfoot museum, and you just do half-ass, you're going to get a half-ass response. And what you're actually going to end up with is people coming that don't, maybe on the line with whether Bigfoot's real, and you'll kick them off on the wrong side. So if you're going to do it, you're responsible for what they think when they leave, for the most part, right? So anyway. We moved up here about 10 years ago. No, actually more than that, like 12 years ago. And I moved up here thinking that when you look on the internet, there's only like 2 sightings up here in this area. I'm thinking, I always wanted to get out of the city. We moved out of Sarasota. My kids were old enough now where I could move, and I just wanted to live in a log cabin. I spent a lot of my younger years, all my summers, in a log cabin up in Lake LaCloche. I just loved being in the woods. I loved the fresh water. I just loved the woods. So I knew when my kids grew up and they could stay in the city, I was going back to the woods. So my wife and I moved up here. I was back still in the restaurant business. And people would come to the restaurant and they'd say, hey, I was a bartender. They'd say, hey, Dave, my kids are coming up this week and they're bringing my grandkids. What's a fun thing to do up here with them? I go, well, you can do this and you can do that, and I kept thinking, God, I get this question so many times up here. I sure wish somebody would open up like a little family attraction up here, because people are looking for something to do. And like I did, like when my kids were growing up, I took them to a lot of fun things that my dad, like he did to me. I shared it with my kids. So I kept thinking, man, I wish somebody would open up a little museum or some kind of fun little thing. And I already had a collection of casts and some neat things, photographs from my investigations. Of course, not nearly enough to open a museum. And I started throwing around with my wife. I started sketching some stuff out. I go, man, we could open up I was actually thinking about getting an RV and making a little mobile museum and like going to festivals and stuff, right?
Oh, that's ironic.
Yeah,
if you know the history of if you know the history of Clifford LaBrecque, it's very ironic. Yeah.
And I kept thinking, but the more my brain thought what to put in it, I realized that they don't make an RV big enough for all the things I want to put in it.
Exactly.
So I was driving home from work one day, and there was this building right on 515 for rent. I was like, oh my God, is God talking to me or something? I mean, how does a building just show up right? So I put my car in there. I go and look at this building. It's an old restaurant. It's been closed down. And I'm looking in the windows. I said, well, let me just call them, right? They come down the next day, open it up for me and look around. I look around, and it's not in the greatest of shape. It's an old pool hall with spit on the walls. Bathrooms are absolutely, ladies' room's not so bad. Just imagine what an old pool hall looks like, the men's room. Terrible. And some of the ceiling tiles are falling down, old carpet. But I looked around and said, the size is perfect. It's perfect. Went home and said, hey, talk to my wife. So, you know what I'm thinking? She's like, oh, are you serious? I'm like, yeah, let's do it. And I already had a few sketches out. So I sketched a few things out, and I don't know how, but I had a knack for this. I didn't know it then, but I know it now, that for detail and for the way things have to be, when you go look at one exhibit, how you look at another one, the way the angle has to be. I have no idea where all this stuff came from. It was like the guy that I was before was some kind of a museum exhibitor or something, and I'm like reborn, and I don't know what he's in there somewhere. I know it sounds weird, but how in the world I know exactly how the sounds are going to go at my first museum, I have no idea. But my brain knew. I just knew. I didn't have any doubt where things had to be, how they had to be mounted, the color of the carpet, the flow, how people would flow. I think I learned that from the restaurant business. And people expect cleanliness. Like they come to a restaurant, it has to be clean. It's got to be clean. So the museum is very clean, which took a lot of work. I spent 5 days just in the bathrooms, scrubbing and painting. I thought my wife was going to have to throw a net over me because I'm in these little stalls for 5 days, scrubbing and painting. We had new toilets installed. And I didn't think I was claustrophobic until day 5. I was about to have a meltdown. I got to finish these bathrooms. But they're still not perfect. But boy, God, they're a lot better than what they were. And we opened up like 2000. I should say this. I moved up here thinking there weren't too many sightings. Here's another revelation in my life.
Okay.
And and the sign arrives. Oh, yeah, the sign's here. We're not open yet, but we got to have the new sign. Take the old sign down. My brother comes and helps me screw this big metal sign, Expedition Bigfoot, the Bigfoot Museum. It's not up for a day. People are coming by. What's this going to be? I tell them it's going to be a gift shop. I didn't even tell the landlord. I just told him it's going to be a wildlife museum. Oh, that sounds interesting, a wildlife museum. And so we get the sign up. And the next day, my brother goes home. I'm in there staining. I'm like 3 or 4 days, maybe a week before opening, staining and putting wood and hooks up and stuff in the gift shop. Knock, knock, knock. I open up. Is this you? Is this going to be a Bigfoot museum? Yeah. Can I tell you a story?
Oh, wow.
No way. I got paint in my hand. I go, yeah. I'm going to put the can and put the lid back on the paint. Yeah, come in. I'm Dave. Hi, I'm whatever. Yeah. So I live right behind here, he says. And I'm out checking my cows. And he says, they go to this creek, and I look down, and there's this gigantic footprint. This is the wintertime. There's a huge human footprint in the mud. He says, I'm looking at this thing. I'm thinking, that's not a bear. He's a local guy, born and raised, hunts. He knows what a print is. He said, I took that tractor, went all the way back to the house and got my wife and brought her all the way back. He said, what does that look like to you? She says, are you kidding me? And then he tells me, he says, my sister-in-law lives right over here on Back Pine Way, which is the next road over from me. I only live 8 miles from the museum. That's the next road from me. She lives over on Back Pine Way. And she tells me she's got a whole family of these things moving through her yard in the fall during about apple time. And he's telling me Back Pine. I don't know what to tell him. Jesus, I can almost throw a rock there from here. And then it started. That was, as soon as the sign went up, it started. Hey, they knock, the phone was ringing, knock, notes on the door.
Oh, my goodness.
I came to the startling revelation that there's way more sightings in Georgia, Tennessee, Kentucky, in these Bible Belt areas than we think they are, because these people, when they're born and raised in a community and they see a Bigfoot, everybody they know is in that community. Mother, father, brother, cousins, boss, ex-boss, all my friends I go hunting, fishing with, when they see a Bigfoot, they might go home and tell their wife or their husband, and then they shut up about it because the impact to their life could be profound. Not could be, it would be profound if you were the crazy man that saw a Bigfoot. And I realized, well, there's way more sightings up here than I'm hearing. And now there's so many pins on the map in this the Blue Ridge, LJ area that I can't put any more. The map would fall in on itself. I can't map anymore on the big map in the back. And I realized there's really not that special about here. If it's here, they're in Tennessee and they're in Kentucky and North. It's the same thing all around here, that people see these things all the time, but they have nowhere to go with their story until some guy like me puts a sign on the front along the side of the road that says Bigfoot Museum. They have a place to go and get it off their chest. And it started, still hasn't stopped, man. I post a sighting on Facebook, and I still got people. This is what my brother saw. Is this what you saw, Karen, in 1985? This is what my Uncle Jim saw. The comments and the information's in the comment section. You read it. It's like, oh man, I saw one of these in Dawson County, and it's now just overwhelming how many people actually see these things, and you don't hear about it. And again, that broke another barrier down. That these things are rarely seen. There's only a few of them. Negative. There's a lot of them, and they're white and they're brown and they're black and they're little and they're big and they have babies, and there's males and there's females with droopy breasts, and there's females with perky ones. There's females with wide hips, and there's females with fit, skinny hips. There's some of them that have a broad, flattened nose, and then they have some that are just stand off their face. They look really, really human-like. There's some that are mean, and there's some that are sweet that will save people's lives. I've talked to all these people. Some people that they actually will go out of the way to save your life. So it's opened, it's kicked the parameters down for me.
Stay tuned for more Bigfoot Society. We'll be right back after these messages.
Wendy's home-style French toast sticks are so delicious, some are saying that they're better than their mom's breakfast.
Excuse me. Did you just say Wendy's French toast sticks are better than my breakfast?
Mom, is that you?
Answer the question.
I said some people are saying that because they're so crispy on the outside and fluffy on the inside and perfect in every way.
Uh-huh. And what do you think?
I think it's time to tell people to choose wisely. Choose Wendy's sweet and crispy home-style French toast sticks.
That's still not an answer.
At participating U.S. Wendy's during breakfast hours.
There's so many sightings now. There's no way. I might talk to 5% of the people that drop off sightings. I have stacks and stacks of papers in my office of people I can't get to.
How are you preserving these, David?
Oh, they're in my office. I put them in envelopes. Yeah, okay. I don't throw anything away.
Okay.
I keep them all, and some people
nice.
And some people are law enforcement and prior military.
Wow.
And some things they're just too disturbing. I can never talk about them. And here's the funny thing too. When you get into this, you think, oh, maybe I'll be part of the program that discloses we'll prove that these things are real. it's kind of the human thing, right? Oh, we can prove it's a mystery. We can prove it. But the further you go down the line, the information line, the further you learn, the more you understand that can never happen. And that I've learned, I've had people call me, a guy on Grassy Mountain. He said he shot one when he was deer hunting and he just wounded. He got a place where it just squirmed around. There was blood in the grass. He said, when it comes back, I'm going to take this thing out. Will you help me market it? I said, hell no. I said, don't ever call me again. I said, don't shoot one. Don't try to be the hero. Because if you think the powers to be, I'm going to tell you, they're going to ruin your life. Let it be. Not only let it be because it doesn't deserve to be shot, but let it be because it's not going to happen. The outcome you think is going to happen is not going to happen. Anybody that shoots one of these things and actually gets a body, there's going to be drugs planted in their house, and you better shut up because you could spend a long time in prison for all the drugs we find in the house. So too many firearms, so you shouldn't have this. They're going to find a reason to shut you up. And it's because some of the information is very, very disturbing. These things are complicated like we are. And some of these things are kind. Some of these things, they're indifferent to us. And some of these things really, really don't like us. And they might not like us for a good reason. And when you realize that we have no natural defense, maybe if you're in a platoon of 10 guys and you're all loaded to the teeth, you've got defense. But most of us, ginseng hunters, or hanging up your clothes to dry, you're back plowing your yard or planting roses, you have no defense against them. And so if you really knew what they were capable of and how stealthy they are, and they possess strange abilities, they can somehow manipulate science that we do not understand yet. It's just science, it's not magic, but they can do things. I've talked to people that have seen them do things that we can't replicate. So we're basically defenseless against these things. So I understand now why it has to remain in the realm that it is. And it took me a while to understand that. A few things from law enforcement, a few things from military, and a few things from seasoned Bigfoot investigators that have seen things. I go, oh. So I continue on with what I do. But if anybody brought me the body, I'd say, get it out of here. It's going to ruin your life. Do you love your kids? Do you like your grandkids? Do you like a normal life? Then forget about proving it to the world, because it is going to bring you nothing but grief.
Has that happened where like someone has tried to give you, like, donate something to the museum and you're like, I don't want this because if I put this on this, well, you're not going to tell me anyways, but if you put it on display, you'll get shut down by the government.
I've not
Has
had
there
that
been
happen
stuff?
yet.
No. Okay, cool.
No, thankfully.
Yeah, right.
Yes, but if anybody brought me something that could cause me grief, I would turn it down. People bring us hair samples and things of that nature, but that's no matter how, I don't care how many hair samples you get. You can have a whole clump of hair. It's still inconclusive. You can have a photograph or video with Photoshop these days is still going to be inconclusive. It'll be interesting. But a dead body, that's going to be kind of hard to disprove that, or even a body specimen or a part of an arm or something like that. But yeah.
Do you think someone has dispatched of one and has had a body at one point?
Oh, certainly. Yeah.
Yeah.
I've talked to a couple of guys that have hit him. The one guy that hit the little dog man.
Oh, sure.
And then I talked to two more guys. One hit one, and he was coming back from he dropped his girlfriend off, and he was coming back, and he hit one at night, and he thought, oh, man, I hit a bear. So he gets out of his car. This was in Florida. Gets out of his car. He's looking at this thing, and the headlights, he's going, it looked like a hairy man laying in there. And you're thinking, oh, my God, I just hit a person. Right. And then all of a sudden, this thing opens its eyes and goes, whoo, and sits up and looks around and looks at him. And he said, and it just jumps up and whoo, takes off.
There's no way. That is Harry and the Hendersons. Like, that's a real story.
That's a real story. Yeah.
That's amazing.
Yep. And I talked to, I talked to so many people that have almost hit them with their car. just like I said, as I went by it, like I stepped in front of my car and I just swerved my truck, and I could see all the hair on its thighs as it went past me. I can't believe I didn't even hit it with my mirror. I'm trying to think if I talked to anybody that shot, other than that one guy that said he shot one, but I don't remember talking to anybody that's actually mortally wounded. I've read stories and heard witnesses describing them shooting one. I did talk to an interesting, and again, the flesh and blood, and then the woo. The fact is, it's both. It's both flesh and blood. I talked to a kid or a man who was like 10 years old, 9 or 10 years old, and he was somewhere in middle Georgia, somewhere just outside of Atlanta, back in the 80s, and his parents had just bought his dad was a single father. He just bought a home in a cul-de-sac. There was no other houses around. It was like the first house in the cul-de-sac. He said, I used to play in the creek. I had 2 older sisters, but they never wanted to play with me. She said, so I'm down by the creek. My dad's at work. I'm playing down at the creek with my little match cars down by the creek, and I can hear somebody walking up behind me through the woods. And I thought it was my dad had come home early from work. I thought I didn't even look up. I just kept playing. But he said it sounded funny while I was walking. And even at my young age, he said, I turned and looked around, and here comes through the woods comes this gigantic hairy man. And he says the reason it sounded weird is because it looked like it was crippled. He said I can't remember if it was right or left, but it's let's just say for conversation's sake, it was the right leg and the right arm. And he said that it was almost dragging its right foot. And he said that's why it was making a strange sound. It was wounded. And he said it was holding its arm and its leg as it walked. And he said it was looking down. Didn't even see me. I saw it first. It was looking down, watching where it was walking. Obviously, he said, because it didn't want to fall. It was already wounded. I didn't see blood. He didn't mention blood, but he said it looked like it was either crippled or had been wounded. And he said when it finally got close enough and could see me, it stopped. And it was like, and it made a face like, oh crap, this kid can see me. And he said, I'm still sitting there on the ground looking at this thing. And then it just goes like this. It just goes, and it just tilted. It looked at me sideways. Immediately, he said, I knew that this thing was not going to hurt me. I knew, even at that young age, that we had just crossed paths accidentally. And he said, then it just walked easy past me. And so when he got past me, it did turn on one time and look at me just to make sure I was still there, and walked off into the woods. So that story, along with others, like the ginseng hunter, who saw one crippled up, he said the hand was so crippled up and the nails had grown over, and its leg was also crippled up. And he said the foot was crippled and the hand, and it looked like it had been born that way, because he said the nails were so long, they were curled over, like it was like that way from birth. That's how crippled it looked. And I had Jim Whitehead, a great illustrator. I think he's in Oklahoma. He sketched me. I sent him over the story so he could sketch me a sketch of it. And he says, you know what this story reminds me of? And he sent me the sketch, and he said, it reminds me of my father. My father had polio. And he said, that looked like this thing was suffering from polio, because it affects one side of the body. It cripples the hand like polio does. And so I did a little bit of investigation on what spreads polio, and polio spreads via feces. That's how it gets around. And I thought, well, that sounds logical. Anyway, I can't say that's what it was, but I can tell you that these things are definitely flesh and blood. There's no doubt that they suffer ailments, they get sick, they get pregnant, they breastfeed, they die. So they are flesh and blood, and they also can do things that we don't understand. And I can tell you a couple little stories about that if you want.
Oh yeah, totally. Go right for it.
You want to hear it right now?
Yeah, I mean now is a good time as any. Totally, because sometimes you forget to do it.
Right. Are you familiar with John Carlson and Adam Davies' story? I think it happened in 2006 in Oregon. Do you know who
no.
Adam Davies is? He's been on
I
History
know of
Channel.
Adam Davies, yes.
Yeah, Nice guy. And so does John Carlson. So these two guys, investigators, were at a SOHA, Southern Oregon Habituation Area, with Matt Johnson. Dr. Matthew Johnson. You familiar with who he is?
Yes.
Yes, okay. He's a controversial figure. But I've met him in person, and he's told me some stuff. He's told me some stuff in person. Okay. And so they're with Matt Johnson in his area. And I think Adam smokes. And Dr. Johnson is really specific. If you can't have any weapons, don't bring a flashlight. When we go out with these things, we're going to camp there. And they come out of the woods, and they'll touch you while you're sleeping. You can hear them jumping around, the little ones moving around. And at night. So it's just getting dark. I don't remember how many days there. It might have been this. I think it was on like the second or no, it wasn't. It was like towards the end of the stay. So I think they were there for like 4 days. So this would have been like night 3. Nothing had happened too much. And they're sitting there. And Adam wants to have a cigarette. So they have to go away from the main campsite over behind some cars. And Adam's going to have a cigarette. And they're sitting there, they're talking. It's dark. And at the end of the drive, there's only one driveway in and one way out of this. It's a campsite, but it's just like a little turnaround in the woods. It's dark. There's no houses or anything out there. And they see this little light appear at the end of the driveway. And they're like, but what is that? They're both looking at it. All of a sudden, this light gets bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger. And they're like, what in the hell are we looking at? And they can also see that the whiteness has become red now. So they went from a light to like they're almost looking at something else. Now, and I know what it was. They know it. They're looking at a sky, some other place. It's like a red space now, and it's not even touched. It's hovering above the ground. And some other things happened. Matt came over and Matt said, "I'm just going to bed," And they were like, "What? Well, you going to bed? Do you not see what's happening over there?" And as they're sitting there watching, these two little things come to the edge of the portal. I'm going to call it a portal now because that's
okay. Yep.
These two little black creatures with glowing red eyes jump out of this portal. And now these two guys, they have no weapons. They're not allowed to bring any weapons. All he's got is a flashlight and a lighter. That's all he's got. There's nowhere to run. What are you going to do? Run in the woods? You're better off where you're at. And these two little things, I got these shiny white teeth. They start running across. He's running across it, and he hits the flash. They were illuminated by the portal, whatever it was. As they run at him, they hit him with the flashlight, and the whole thing just dissipates. It's
really?
Gone. These things are gone. The image of this portal thing, whatever it is gone. And they're like trying to catch their breath, like, what the heck was that? As they're talking, here it comes again. It appears again, and it gets bigger, and you can see the red sky. And here's these two little things, and they jump back out and charge him again. And they just did the same thing they did the first time. Hit him with a flashlight, and poof, it all goes away. They're like, well, as they're discussing again, it happens again. I don't remember if it happened 3 or 4 times, but it happened more than twice. Same thing. And the only thing that seemed to make it go away was this goofy flashlight. I have no idea. I don't think they know why. So I think they got Matt Johnson out of bed discussing what was going on. That's not as important as when they get back. Both these guys, they're flesh and blood. At least Adam Davies says he's a Yeti guy. He's been on Expedition Yeti. And I can tell you this because they've already made public announcements and videos explaining to what happened. I've spoken to both of them. There's no mistake what they saw. They didn't see a bear. There's no way it wasn't what they said it was because there's nothing that can happen out there in the woods in a remote area.
Stay tuned for more Bigfoot Society. We'll be right back after these messages.
That's not what it said. And they didn't see it once. They saw it 2 or 3 times, the same thing unfolding. I was like, oh my God, really? And then I'm getting other reports from other ladies that see portals in the sky. And this is right about the time all these swirling things started to appear on the news. Don't worry, it's just a rocket going astray, which probably some of them are.
How long ago was that?
This happened in, I believe it was 2006.
Okay.
At the SOHA. And then
Gotcha.
My wife meets a guy who saw a Bigfoot walk into a portal. It just disappeared. Then I have another guy reach out to me who's a Bigfoot investigator with the BFRO, and he said he talked to a policeman. He said it stepped behind a curtain, but there was nothing there. It just disappeared into a curtain. I'm like, dude, I'm not ready for this. Even though as I'm learning as I'm going on, I still resist a lot of this stuff. You know, I'm a
why though? Why? Because it feels like you've always been drawn to this sort of stuff. Like, why are you resisting it?
Because I really, portals. I mean, what do you do with that? I mean, how do you? There's no way to package it. I'm a human like everybody else. I like to try to have some picture of what's happening. Yeah. And I'm realizing that the more I learn, the less I know. And the smarter I think I am, the more I realize that school has not prepared me for this. And basically, when you're trying to figure this thing out, you realize that school has given us, say we're trying to navigate our way to Mars, and we go to school and they give us the directions to a toaster oven. They go, here you go. So we don't have the tools. We were purposely not given the tools to understand and figure this out. So you're really starting from square one. Even at 40 or 50 years old, when you start getting this stuff, you don't have like a big library of things. So what you end up doing is just talking to as many witnesses as you can, because that helps to put a little bit of a picture together for you. You know, and I didn't even get into the part where I talked to people that seen Bigfoot wearing clothes.
I've never heard of that before. I have never heard of that ever.
Yeah, I was doing some research to do a presentation, and it turned out I had to trim it down. I had to leave that out. But there's all kinds of old reports of Bigfoots wearing not like nice clothes, like old scraggly clothes.
Really?
And then I met a guy. My first report about that was I met a guy him and his brother were going somewhere. They were driving through the big plains out west. And it was dusk, and they're driving along, and there was this huge field on the right side. And this guy the guy I was talking to he used to work, he was contracted by the government in Florida he was a hunter, and he was a tracker, and he would be contracted by the government when somebody escaped from prison, like in Stark Prison or one of these remote prisons in Florida. He would go in with the dogs and horses, and he'd find these guys, the inmates. So he's an interesting guy. And he says, we can see this thing running through the field. And my brother and I are looking at this thing going, what in the hell? That's not a horse. And he said, we're driving like 50, 55, 60 miles an hour. And this thing is actually keeping up with us, but we can't quite see it. But we realize it's coming on an angle, and it's going to intersect the road. If it continues on, it's going to hit the road. And as they're driving, they're looking at this thing. And he said, when this thing hit the side of the road, it was so flippin' big that it came to the side of the road and just stopped right as our car. It didn't cross in front of us, but he said it stopped. He said it was so big, standing on two legs, covered in hair. It was so big it could have reached over and tapped me through my open driver's side window. That's how big it was. It was huge. And he said, here's the part that I don't understand. I go, what's that? He said, this thing was wearing overalls. I said, what? He said he was wearing overalls. An old pair. And I didn't get to ask him. I didn't think to ask him, were like really tight or was it loose? Right. I didn't ask him little questions, things I think of after I'm done. The guy's gone. Yeah. And so I didn't know where. But then I find out there's all kinds of historical stories of Bigfoots. Some Bigfoots being seen wearing clothes. I'm not saying they're trying to dress up. They're kind of scraggly old clothes. And then, are you familiar with Barton Nunnally?
Yeah, Kentucky Inhumanoids.
Yeah.
He's on the list to talk to. He sounds like a cool dude.
So I'm not going to tell you his mother described looking in the window. This is a little piece of it. Okay. His mother described looking through the window was this thing like a person, but it had a face of like a German shepherd or wolf. Oh, wow. And it was wearing a blouse. So when I tell you we're going down the rabbit hole.
Yeah.
Yeah. I don't understand that. I met a guy who, do you have time for another short story?
Sure.
I'm just trying to blow your mind. I like telling people this kind of stuff because these stories are out there. They're out there, but unfortunately, the mainstream guys, I don't know if they don't want to talk about it because they don't have an answer for it.
Sure.
I'll tell you, I don't have an answer for it, but I'm telling you, I've met these people in person, and I'm looking. I'm not like, I don't believe anything. I'm looking. When you're telling me your story, I'm looking at you. I'm looking at your wife. Are they paying attention to you? Are they laughing? It's just going to be a joke.
Yeah.
And so I had this old guy. I think I was maybe open a year at the museum, and this is profound. And he goes to the museum. He's a well-dressed fella. He's probably in his 70s. He's got his wife. It looks like his son's wife, and they got like 2 or 3 grandkids. There's like a big group of them. And they go to the museum. I'm happy to be working that day. And he says, I said, hey, thanks for coming. I appreciate it. He says, are you the owner? I said, yeah. I'm all happy. Yeah. He says, I need to tell somebody this. I came up here to tell a story. And I want to tell somebody this before I die. And I can understand. Like I said, he's probably in his 70s.
Sure.
And he says, I was raised right here in LJ. Oh, I said, okay. I'm thinking, I don't know what I'm thinking, but it's just, I've just heard a lot of normal stories. And he says, you know where Tolona Ridge is at, Tolona Mountain? I go, yeah, there's a big campground up there right now. They just built it a couple of years ago. He said, yeah, I used to go up there with my friends. And he said, my neighbor at this farm, we lived on a farm, and my neighbor, even though he was a ways away, I knew him from school, but I didn't know him really well. And he says, I had just got a van. This probably would have been maybe in the late 60s, early 70s, I'm guessing. He was still in high school. And he says, me and my neighbor kid that I knew from school, but I didn't know really well, and these 2 sisters that I'd known for a long time, and another one of my friends, we'd all piled into my van I just got, and we went up to the top of Tolona Ridge, and we had a little cooler of beer. And he said, we're just going to do what high schoolers do. We're just going to go up there and talk and drink beer and tell stories. We get to the top, overlooking the ridge, and he says, we hadn't even had a beer yet. I said, I just parked the car. He says, I'm sitting in the driver's side, and then one of the sisters is sitting there. He told me their names, sitting next to me, but I couldn't write them down. He kind of caught me out by the door, and I wasn't going to excuse myself to get. So he says, she's sitting in the passenger side, and then right behind her, sitting on a bench, is her sister, and behind me, sitting on the bench along the length of the van, is this kid that I knew from school.
Sure.
And all the way in the back is another one of my friends from school that I knew pretty well. And he says, we had just parked the car. I hadn't even gotten a beer yet. And I'm talking to the girl after I packed. I'm talking to the girl, and she's looking behind me, and all of a sudden her eyes get this big, and she starts to scream. And she's like panicking. And he's like, what the? So he turns around to look right behind him, and where this kid from school that he didn't know really well, where he was sitting, his neighbor next farm over, he wasn't sitting there anymore. What was sitting there was a big, hairy man.
No way. Inside the van?
It's doing this. It's looking around at all of them. It's panicked. It's not looking like it's going to hurt anybody. It's looking scared, like it was surprised. And he says, it's looking at me, it's looking at her. And my brain's trying to figure out what happened to my friend. But it scared him so bad. He reaches over to the door handle to open. He's going to bail out. And his hand accidentally hits the interior light switch. And the interior light comes on. As he's struggling for the door handle, his brain goes, hey, the light's on. So he's just about to bail, and he turns around and looks, and the kid is back. That thing is gone. The kid is now back in its place. And it's doing the same thing. He's doing the same thing. He's looking around like, what? We all saw it, he said. It was no mistake. And, of course, my brain is reeling. And I don't really want to interrupt the guy, like question him, interrogate. He just came here to tell his story.
Right.
And it's interesting that he gave me the girls' names. He told me, we left there. We all left in shock. The kid was back. Whatever this thing was gone. And the 2 girls didn't come to school for a while. And when he finally saw them, he found out that they couldn't function, the 2 sisters. and their mother had to take them to a psychologist in Atlanta to get these girls help so they could sleep. They were having nightmares. I have no idea what the psychologist could say to these girls, but he told me their names and everything. And of course, my brain's reeling. I'm just like, I've never taken anything like that before. But as I'm looking at him, I'm looking at the family, and they were like, these people they were like a front. Those kids weren't walking around. They weren't kicking their feet. They weren't looking at their phone. These people are like, this is my grandpa. Go ahead and say one stupid thing to my grandpa. The kid, everybody. And I was really amazed, not only what he was telling me, but the scene that it was said in. And I knew this fellow, what he was telling me, this happened to him. And I never thought to ask the guy, was it wearing the kids' clothes? I was just like, oh my God.
That would have been a great question. Yeah, totally.
Yeah, no doubt. I've struggled with that. That would have been an important clue, but I never thought to ask him until like after he left. And I didn't know. I didn't even get his name. I didn't write his name down because it sounded to me like what I get from up here. A lot of people, the minute you reach for a pen, it's over. How do you spell your last name? Yeah, maybe I'll come back. Forget it. People are like, hey, Dave, why don't you get a camera? I'm like, no, you don't understand. If you want to get these stories, it's got to be free-flowing. They're not interested in proving to the world. They just want to get it off their chest and talk to somebody that believes them. They're not interested in you publishing their story. So my brain has become, this is excellent exercise. My brain has become so good at remembering details now. What year, how big, what was the wildlife management area? How many were camping? What time of day? So I have to remember all this stuff. I do it on the phone. Luckily, when I'm talking on the phone, I can write it all down. But when I have a witness talking, I rarely ask, can I grab a pen? If there's one there, I'll ask them. I'll just say, what year was this? I don't get their personal information because you ruin it. So, yeah, that's some of the other stuff. That's stuff I struggle with when I lay my head down at night. And then you read other stories from other witnesses that parallel this, and you go, oh man, this rabbit hole, it's so deep. And it's really telling us that we don't know anything about our real natural world. In school, they give us just enough junk food education that we can go out and get a job, get a driver's license, pay your taxes, and just quietly die and go away. It's pretty much what they want us to do. They really don't want us to have this information. And when you realize how unusual, how frightening these things happen right close. You don't have to be way out in the remote Pacific Northwest. This happens to people who live in small towns in Tennessee, Kentucky, Florida, Georgia, Oklahoma. That happens when you're hanging your clothes out in the backyard, or when you go out to lock your chickens up at night. You have a run-in. I talked to a lot of people that have seen whole families of these things. The little girl Bigfoot, boy's holding up the fence, mom's standing over here, dad is standing just a few feet away, and he's glaring at this child witness that's went out to get the eggs, and and the little girl's grabbing the hens, picking up the bottom of the fence, hands them to little boy Bigfoot, who hands it to mom, and she's got a whole handful of hens, laying hens, and the father Bigfoot, I find it so interesting, is looking at this small girl, this young girl who's witnessing this, like, go ahead, move, and I'll kill you. And when I why would something so big and so powerful have to put this on a young girl? You know, even now at age, she's a woman now. She's crying because she's reliving the fear. And you think, well, it just doesn't seem, as for us humans, it doesn't seem fair to traumatize a child. But that happens a lot with some of these big males. They look at a young child like it's a deadly snake. They're just as mean and foreboding to a child as it would be to a man with a gun. It doesn't happen a lot like that, but it does happen. I've talked to a lot of witnesses. So, like, when I say some of these things don't like us, man, I mean, they don't like us a lot,
Stay tuned for more Bigfoot Society. We'll be right back after these messages. I can't imagine the stuff you have in the envelopes that stays in the envelopes in your office.
Yeah.
The stories you're telling me are insane. Like, they're crazy, man. They're awesome. Wow.
And I'm not the only one that gets it. Yeah, I know
Yeah.
other investigators get it, but they hush on them. And I really appreciated John Carlson and Adam Davies making a few videos with that. And even the interviewer was having a hard time. God, they're like nagging reporters from TV. Like, they don't believe the story. They'll just do anything they can to like try to foul them up. But these guys did not want to talk about it. They just didn't need the heat. But when they came back, Dr. Johnson started talking about it, and they found, well, we're just gonna have to come out and just tell them what happened. We're gonna have to give them our side of the story. And their side of the story was just like, wow. So, yeah, I think if I want somebody to know that we're just getting started in the Bigfoot world, I would say, you know what they're trying to tell you that these things are? It's way better. It's way better than that. It's not a rare ape. It's much, much cooler than that. And that's what drives me to do what I'm doing until the day I'm so old I can't do anymore. And the museum is built so it's not boring. I want you to be as excited about this as I am. And I have to do it in a way. I can't bring you a real Bigfoot and take you out in the woods. So I have to click those young minds. I've got to make sure they have enjoyable, amazing time, because when they leave, I might be the first person that ever introduced them to the Bigfoot subject. And you have to make it right. You got to do it right. So.
Do you ever get reports for things that are obviously not Bigfoot? Like, I saw a weird pale thing crawl across the road, or like something that's like, you're like, whoa, this is not Bigfoot, and I don't know what category to put this report in.
The closest I get to that are dogman reports, and I've had one Mothman report from two Mothman reports. Yeah, one from a Catholic priest, and one from an actual Mothman witness up in Point Pleasant. I got a chance to talk to her, and we actually had Sibylla Irwin, an awesome forensic artist, sit down with this lady, and she did an amazing. This is what Mothman actually looked like. There's so many stylized versions of what it looked like, but so we had to do that. But look, if Mothman's real and Dogman are real, if you're still thinking that these things are all some kind of ape, I don't know what to tell you. I mean, these are all clear indications that there's something else going around here that we don't have control of. And the official narrative coming from the historians and the archaeologists, probably flawed, to say the least.
Okay, so I want to start getting into to Clifford stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Listeners, I really hope that you've heard that episode already. So let me summarize it really quick. So I was reading David Weatherly's book about Iowa cryptids. He said something about the Iowa Bigfoot Information Center from the late 1970s, which sent me on a multi-month investigation about who were these guys. I got all these articles about there was a flap of Bigfoot sightings all over the state of Iowa in the late 70s. It was crazy stuff. Then I found out Clifford was no longer with us. He had some Bigfoot taxidermy statue that was made, and I got his book off of Amazon. I called up the guy who sculpted the taxidermy. He's still alive. I talked to him from Minneapolis, and I even tracked down his partner, Kevin Cook, who is still alive, and was able to talk to him. Cliff is unfortunately, rest in peace. He is no longer with us. But, so what I would love you to do, David, is just give me the whole story of like how you met Clifford, mm-hmm. how you got the thing in your possession that's in your possession that's related to Cliff. I just want to hear that, whatever you can tell me about that story, because I think it's going to fill in so many gaps of that whole thing.
Yeah. So I think I saw a picture of the sculpture, Cliff's sculpture, and I found his name. I found his name with the sculpture. I don't think I'd ever heard of the guy. And I thought, oh, that is an amazing sculpture, right? So I did some digging to find his name and his mailing address, and I knew he's an older fella. And I thought, yeah, and I didn't see a lot of online presence from him. So I got his address and I actually hand wrote him on an old school letter.
Oh, wow.
And a tip for anybody, an investigator, once you find somebody, an older gentleman, witness, if you handwrite them a letter, I don't mean write on an email and then print it, handwrite them a letter and send it to them, you're going to get a much better response because they respect the effort you made to write them a letter just instead of shoot them a quick email.
Wow.
So anyways, it just works better.
Sure.
So he got the letter and he sent me back a letter and with his phone number. And so I don't think he had a Facebook presence at all. No, I don't think so. It's no social email. Social. Anyway, so I got a chance to talk to him. And I think I was talking to him before I opened up the first museum. And I needed a sculpture. And so I was talking to him, and I don't think I'd realized about his Bigfoot attack until I had talked to him. I was like, there's a story behind Cliff, and the attack was absolutely amazing. And like I said, I'd already been through a lot. I've already learned about all these strange things, so they were already in my library. When he was telling me things, he didn't know me from Adam. And he was telling me all these things that I was like, oh my God, he's telling me all the things I've heard before that nobody wants to talk about. And he's saying the same thing I'm saying. Why the hell these mainstream guys aren't talking about this stuff? He said, I don't even go to conferences. I've backed out of the Bigfoot world. They just keep puking out this junk and got people believing stuff it's not true. And I was like, yeah, and I totally understand. Cliff was old school. And he was kind of like your grandpa, like my grandpa.
Okay.
And he would just tell you the way it is.
Yep.
And then he didn't care if it was socially, if it stumbled on it or he said something, a bad word. He didn't care. He was going to puke it out just the way. And let's just say Cliff was not ready for prime time in the way he was. But the stories and I knew that. I knew I couldn't expose, or no one could expose Cliff LaBrecque to the world because he was old school, man.
Wow.
So we were talking about the sculpture, and he told me he turned down an offer for $80,000 on eBay. And I was like, well, I knew immediately that this thing was out of my reach.
That's legit, yeah.
Yeah, and I wanted him to know that I said, I mean, it's so good. It belongs not in your cellar. It belongs in a museum where people can see it and appreciate it. It's beautiful.
Yeah.
He told me about the eyes. It took him like a month just to get the eyes right. We had to order them from Germany or something.
Oh, are you serious?
Yeah, the eyes. It took him forever.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah, he said it took him forever to get the eyes. He had to get them, I think he said from Germany. And I can't remember what animal, but they finally found a company that he was. Did
he say why? Because like he had seen the eyes himself during that attack, or
no? Because
he didn't say why.
Yeah, what did he say?
Okay.
He built the model. He built the model before his attack.
That's right, because it was based on a sighting from the Pacific Northwest.
Right. And
they also had brought in a guy from Alaska to verify how the sculptor looked, which is very interesting. Yeah.
Yeah. And so as interesting as the model is, which
I
love it. When Cliff LaBrecque starts telling you about what happened to him, you're just like, oh my God. So are you aware of any of this attackers?
So you literally, David, are the spirit of Cliff being able to tell his story, because it's like, it's not out there, dude. It's so like anything you can share about his Bigfoot attack is him living on. So please definitely go ahead.
No matter where I go, I can't figure out where this happened. I don't know if this happened in Michigan, but I asked the people that was picking up, did this attack of his happen here in Arkansas? No.
Wait, hold on. Because it's his sighting, right?
Yeah.
It happened in Clive, Iowa.
Did it happen in Iowa?
It did. It happened in Clive, because I found that out and I was like, holy mackerel. I lived next to this guy in Valley Junction, literally like 10 minutes away, and I never knew he was there.
It
happened in Clive. Yeah. Go ahead. Sorry.
No, thank you. I'm going to write that down.
Yeah.
Now I know where. I couldn't find it anywhere. And I thought he sent me recordings So I have his voice telling me the story.
You have the oh my
gosh, I've got his recording to tell you the story and his thoughts in his voice. Yeah. But I had long conversations with him as well. And he was telling me things like, well, I'll just tell you the whole story.
Okay, go ahead.
I guess this happened in Clive, Iowa.
Right.
And, he said, I had a big picture window. And in the back, there's trees back there, and I had a firewood pile. And he said, one day I see this animal out there picking the bark off the firewood and eating like the bugs or something that was in between the bark. He was eating something that was in the bark. You know, like, oh my God, this thing was coming back every couple of nights. And he said, here's the strange thing. He said, after I'd be waiting for it. And he said, it wasn't huge. It was only like 5.5 feet tall. It wasn't one of these huge ones that people see. It was like man size. And I've done plenty of investigations where they were man size.
Right.
So he's like, wow. So he says, the weird thing is I'd be waiting for him at night to come back. And I reach over, get a sip of my coffee, look back, it'd be there. And he's like, how the hell did it get there? He said, you don't understand. It can't just be there. It has to walk across my yard. I just looked away for a second, and then it's there. He said, I'd watch it. I'd look over and grab something and turn back, and it'd be gone. He like, how? There's no way it can be just, I would see it walking off, or I'd see it walking in. He said, this thing was just there, and the minute I'd look away, it'd be gone. And I'd look away again, and I'd look back, it'd be there. He said, that's when I realized there's something else going on here. And this happened, I don't know how long, a week, 2 weeks, he was coming back. But he only saw one up to this point. So he was a hunter. He had hunted before, but he didn't have the skill he thought to bring this thing down.
Right.
So he found a hunter in town, some guy he knew. And this guy said, okay, I'll come over and shoot it for you.
Oh, no way.
So Cliff's like, the night is supposed to happen. He's calling this guy. You coming? Are you coming? And he's drunk. He ain't coming. He's backing out. And now Cliff's like, I'll do it. So in his backyard, he has this old car that's busted. It's got those old crank windows, you know?
Yeah.
So he goes out. It's not dark yet. He goes out into this car, and the cranks are still there, but the little plastic handle on the end, it's not there. So you got to kind of like grab a hold of it. Remember the old days? You're probably not that old.
Yeah.
You got to roll the window up and down by grabbing the flat crank instead of the handle. So he gets in there. He rolls the window down about this far. He's got both windows down so he can breathe in there just a little bit. And he's sitting in there with his rifle. And
oh my goodness.
He's waiting for this thing to show up, and he says, I looked away and I looked up and it was there. I'm oh my God, I go look at it. He said, my heart is like pounding out of my chest. And he says, I don't hardly even remember. I remember picking up the gun and getting it out the window and getting my crosshair on this thing. And all of a sudden I hear this commotion behind me on the other side of the car. He says, I turn around, here comes another one. He said, it's coming right at me. And he says, I drop my gun and I grab a hold of the little crank and I'm trying to roll the window up. And I can only get it to go up like a half an inch every time I crank it. And he said, I didn't get it up fast enough. And this thing reaches in and grabs a hold of him and snatches him right to the window. And he says, it didn't say a word to me. He said, but I heard it in my brain. He said, what the hell are you doing? We're just trying to get something to eat. And then it just goes, bang, 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 bang. It just bounces them all over the car.
No way.
Just smashes him around the car. He passes out.
Oh, my goodness.
He wakes up, and that's the end of the story. So
that is the awesomest story I've ever heard.
Never saw him again after that. That was the end. That was the end of the show for them. But these kind of stories, and then Cliff started reaching out to other people and started talking to people in Iowa. And he gave me some names of some people that said he knows what they are. They're not some kind of primitive ape.
Oh, hold on. So sorry, he gave you names of like witnesses in Iowa or
of a gal. No, it was where he lived then. This is in Arkansas.
Okay.
And I don't remember. I think I wrote the name down. It was some gal who does some channeling with them. And, I have a hard time. It's difficult to.
I gotcha. Yeah.
Yeah. When I'm channeling, you can say pretty much anything. I kind of don't get into that. A lot of that stuff. I'm not saying it's not real, but I've just talked to too many people that channel them and just come up with ridiculous things. So I didn't really want to talk to her.
He also went through a hypnosis session to try to I think he regressed to that situation because they were going to release a CD of that session, but it never got released. Like he passed away before it actually happened. He could release it from what I could find out. Oh my goodness. That is so validating. Thank you to hear that story. That is amazing. I'm sure there's a few listeners that are just blown away. Like, wow, that's awesome.
I think that mind speak doesn't happen a lot.
Yeah.
But when you hear it from people, they're going, look, I didn't think it. It wasn't my imagination. So that again, that's just another piece of the pie that we have to deal with.
Did he ever mention his research in Iowa or the Iowa Bigfoot Information Center or anything like that?
No, I don't recall.
Okay.
There might be something in the recordings he sent me.
Okay.
But I don't remember him. I remember him telling me that he used to tour, you go around with the Bigfoot, and he told me all about all the posters and everything. But
they would go. Their final tour was it took them all the way out to Michigan, and then they ran out of money and had to go back to Iowa, and that's where they kind of disbanded. And then he moved south, more or less. That's summarizing what happened. But wow. So. And so eventually, how long were you trying to get that people have to realize when we say statue or sculpture, imagine it's a full size, you know how you see like wildlife taxidermy mounts in a museum? The guy who made this mount was the same guy who made the African elephant taxidermy mount in the Smithsonian American History Museum. He's a museum famous guy from Iowa who now lives in Minneapolis, and Cliff had him make a Bigfoot taxidermy mount for him to bring around. They brought it to the Iowa State Fair in the late 70s to try to raise money for this museum that never happened.
Yep.
And I've talked to people that as kids, they saw that mount in the Iowa State Fair in the late 90s, 70s, and Cliff and Kevin used to sell shirts and posters, and they still had the shirt in their attic. So I've seen like a picture of the actual shirt it's the poster on a shirt that's on Cliff's book as well. It's fascinating. But you were finally able to get the taxidermy mount, and when I saw the photos, I was like, oh, he's taken a U-Haul to Arkansas. I was like, oh, it's going down. It is so I was so pumped because I knew Cliff was in Arkansas.
Yeah.
I was like, it's gotta be, dude.
I wasn't sure I was going to be able to get it.
Yeah.
And because the family was fractured. And, but I told Cliff, man, I said, Cliff, this thing belongs in a museum, man.
Totally.
And even though, look, if I had $100,000 to give him, he probably wouldn't take it because that's his baby.
Oh,
so
yeah.
I knew when he turned down when you turned down an $80,000 offer, right? And let me tell you, I still didn't accept it, even though I was like, oh my God, am I going to actually finally get Cliff's? Because it's not just about the sculpture; it's about Cliff. Right?
That's right. It's not just about the sculpture. Totally.
Right.
Totally.
Right. It's an artifact because I call it artifact because it's a part of a Bigfoot story. So even though it's not based on the one he saw, it's the guy who made. I mean, let me tell you, when you look up at this thing, the hands, the feet, It looks like it would just turn around and look at you. That's how amazing this thing is. And of course, the story behind Cliff's attack is even more amazing than the actual sculpture. So I still did not accept it until we had loaded it up. God, we were so lucky to have, there were like 5 people there to help us pick this thing up.
Okay.
Take it off the base and carry it into the truck. It only weighs like 150 pounds. The whole thing.
Really?
But you take it off the base. Yeah. And the whole way I'm driving back, I'm like, yeah, I could get into an accident and get killed. This thing could get wet.
Right,
I was not accepting it until it was in my prepaid storage facility, covered up, closed it, put the lock on. I went,
boom.
Okay, we got it.
Sounds good. This has been an amazing conversation. David, I could talk to you for hours, but this has been amazing. You have put in all the puzzle pieces for me for the story of Cliff and more. Thank you so much. I have a feeling we'll be in touch after this for sure. Can you do a quick plug? Because we only have a few minutes left. Can you do a quick plug for your museum and just like what are things there that people are not going to see at other places? There's got to be like unique. Sell the museum to the listeners. Yeah. Let's get them there.
And well, we have another full model there made by a police officer. It's a beautiful model. We call him Raven. That was made from his sighting. I have Tom Slick's expedition gear from his actual
awesome.
expeditions in the Himalayas. I've got his stuff there. Peter Burns' camera, a bunch of stuff he had in the Himalayas. I got that from the family of Tom Slick.
That's amazing.
There's so many photos and sketches and breaks and I don't know how many different casts. We have full illuminated maps of Florida and Georgia sighting maps in the museum. You can see them in full color, and it tells you what kind of sighting. Was it up close? Was it far away? Then we have also maps of the repeated sightings. They keep coming back over and over.
Is Clifford's Bigfoot on display right now? Sorry.
No, it's gonna go in a new museum. It's much
new
less
museum.
I love to put it in this museum. I just don't have. I'm out of room, and I'm not going to jam Cliff's baby in a corner and go, "Oh, there's Cliff's stuff."
Oh yeah, no one puts Cliff's baby in a corner.
Yeah. Yeah, thank you. That's awesome.
Right? Yeah. Okay.
It's going to go in a new museum that I've been working for years on.
Whoa.
That's going to encompass all these things we've talked about.
Where's that going to be?
I'm searching for a building. I've been searching for a building for a year.
It's in Georgia, though?
I'd like it to be in Georgia because I don't want to have to drive. It could be in Georgia. It might be in Pigeon Forge. It could be in Florida.
Oh, dude, Pigeon Forge or Gatlinburg? Holy mackerel, dude.
Yeah, so matter of fact, the wife and I are headed there in 10 days for 4 days to meet realtors and find out what buildings are going to be available. Do I want it on the main road or off the road? So that we're going on a trip just to figure that out.
Amazing, David.
Yeah, but it's going to encompass all of it. So when I tell you that this world is more amazing than just looking for a strange ape, this new museum is going to bring all of it to the best I can do.
Wow.
Ancient civilizations, giants, dogman,
awesome.
Bigfoot,
UFO
witness, abduction cases, real artifacts. That's all I do. This is my job. I reach out to UFO abductees. Do you still have the shirt you're wearing? Yeah, I still have that shirt. Can I put it for your, Bigfoot was licking my pots and pans? Can I use those? Yeah, I still got them in my camping gear.
This is amazing.
So it's just collecting. It just takes years to do all this. I'm a one-man show, one-man band. And my wife, thank God, my wife who supports me.
She's on board, it sounds like, which is amazing. Go her. That's awesome.
Yeah, I'm lucky. I could not do this without my wife.
David, thank you so much for coming on. I'm going to go ahead and we're going to cut it here, but you are awesome, and I love what Expedition Bigfoot is doing. Hopefully I can get down there from Iowa someday or wherever the new museum is to see Cliff's Bigfoot, of course. And have a great night, sir.
You're welcome. You take care.
Thank you for listening to Bigfoot Society. If you like the show, please review and rate it 5 stars on iTunes. Hit the share button and send this episode to all your friends on social media. Subscribe to Bigfoot Society wherever you listen to podcasts. It doesn't cost a thing. Pick up a Bigfoot Society shirt or enamel pin over on our Etsy page, and people will tell you all about their Bigfoot sightings when you wear it. At least that's what people tell us. That's what happens. If you'd like to become an official member of Bigfoot Society with a membership card, a community of like-minded individuals, and extra content each month, then please consider becoming a supporter of the podcast by going to www.patreon.com/The Bigfoot Society. Thanks for listening.
Wendy's home-style French toast sticks are so delicious, some are saying that they're better than their mom's breakfast.
Excuse me, did you just say Wendy's French toast sticks are better than my breakfast?
Mom, is that you?
Answer the question.
I said some people are saying that because they're so crispy on the outside and fluffy on the inside and perfect in every way.
Uh-huh. And what do you think?
I think it's time to tell people to choose wisely. Choose Wendy's sweet and crispy home-style French toast sticks.
That's still not an answer.
At participating U.S. Wendy's during breakfast hours.
Do you like aliens, UFOs, cryptids, and the supernatural?
What about self-defecating humor?
Actually, it's self-deprecating humor.
Well, you may both be right. Alien Theorist Theorizing is a comedy podcast that examines cases like
Roswell, Bigfoot, Dyatlov Pass, or the Atacama alien.
Was that little pickle baby that was found at Chili's? It was alien remains found in Chile. We also explore the minds of some of the UFO community's best.
We talk crop circles with Freddie Silva.
And we explore the current state of UFO disclosure
with my man, Richard Dolan.
If any of these topics pique your interest, grab a beer and come hang out and theorize with some not-so-sober, like-minded weirdos.
As we wade through the BS and get inspired by the possibilities.
New episodes every Friday. Subscribe to Alien Theorist Theorizing free anywhere you find podcasts or go to alientheorists.com.